I'm going to be spending a lot more time in here with you lot because I love it in here. I fucking love it!
5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think it's a helpful question to keep revisiting. And you need which podcast episode to listen to. You're choosing the thoughts that are going to arise. Now, that keeps working for us once it's done. That's something that's different and perhaps a little bit better than advice. You know, advice is actually kind of brittle and context dependent. Somebody can have a really good plan, a really good piece of advice to give you, but if it doesn't fit your context, then it's actually not great advice for your particular situation. Whereas questions are very adaptable. So I think maybe what I should do is just go through some of the questions that I like to ask myself for my annual review and throughout the rest of the year. So I guess we could say this first category is just kind of like questions that help improve self-awareness or help kind of bring me back to center. So like the first thing, and I think actually this might be a question from Derek Sivers or some version of it from him, which is, what am I optimizing for? You know, sometimes people optimize for money, sometimes they optimize for free time, sometimes they optimize for creative output or being able to choose the projects they work on, all kinds of stuff. But that answer probably changes over time. What I'm optimizing for today is different than what I was optimizing for 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think it's a helpful question to keep revisiting. And you need to decide what it is for you. Otherwise, it's easy to kind of slide into this status signaling or just kind of like doing the things that you feel like you're encouraged to do by society or by your friends or peers or your parents or whatever. So what am I optimizing for? Another way of phrasing that is maybe like, what's the real objective here? Like, what am I actually trying to achieve? So some version of that question. I also like, does this activity fill me with energy or drain me of energy? You can tell a lot just by whether it like fills up your cup or not. And ideally, you'll be spending more time in the next year on things that fill you with energy and less time on things that drain you with energy. Speaking of the things that drain you, maybe like a sub question that I like to keep in mind is, does the amount of attention I'm giving this match its true importance? And man, there's so many years when I find that I'm giving something a lot of attention that actually is not that important. And it's nice to check in and I'm trying to craft better information flows. Almost every idea that you have is downstream from what you consume. We don't usually think about it that way, but like when you choose who to follow on Twitter, you're choosing your future thoughts in a sense. You're creating the information flow, what the timeline, what the feed is going to look like. Or when you choose what book to read or which podcast episode to listen to, you're choosing the thoughts that are going to arise. Now, you may not necessarily know what they are, but over time, you can start to learn which sources of information are higher signal than others.
On farms, and then we lived in cities, and now we're going to live on the internet.
And I almost feel like that is like the main habit to try to build, especially in our current modern society, because information is overflowing and so widely accessible. The person who creates better information flows gets better. How I choose to run mine. And you have to choose what you're trying to accomplish. And in my case, like, I don't want to have a big team, but I do want to make as big of an impact as possible. And so the first question I ask is like, rather than optimizing for money, let's optimize for time. So how do I want to spend my days? And then I try to make as few choices as possible that violate that answer. And you got to keep coming back to that. How do I want to spend my days? What do I want my time to be spent on? And within that, how can we reach the most people possible or make the most money possible, but not without violating that? Because there's like all kinds of things you do. You know, I could staff up, I could build a bigger business, whatever, but like, I'm not interested in spending my days like that. So that's the first thing, is you got to decide what you're trying to do. A question that I love and that I keep coming back to for increasing leverage, and I try to encourage both Lindsay and I to think about this over and over again, is what is the work that keeps working for us once it's done? So as an example, when Atomic Habits came out, I did a ton of interviews, and some of those interviews were on radio. And I don't really do radio interviews anymore, because as soon as I get done with that 10-minute segment or whatever it was, all the work that I put in, it vanishes. Nobody's listening anymore. It's off the air. Whereas a podcast, like, you know, what we're doing right now, is being recorded. And so people can continue to listen to it. And, you know, I've done a bunch of podcasts for the book, and there's somebody somewhere listening to one of them right now. It's almost like there are multiple versions of James out there, and they're all continuing to work right now. And that's an example of like the work that keeps working for you once it's done. If you can do one or two things a day that are going to keep working for you in the long run, man, you end up like 2 or 3 or 5 years later and you just have this tidal wave of previous effort that is working for you. I think that's a way of trying to anchor yourself and not like lose yourself and let the algorithm kind of run the show. So I think your habits and your identity are very connected, and the actions that you take shape or support, they provide evidence for the type of person that you are. And so it's worth asking yourself, what are my actions moving me closer to? And you want to make sure that you're on a good path.
May I read something from your fantastic website? So this is on identity-based habits. I want to highlight this and add it to what you just said because I think it's critically important. And feel free to revise any of this. And you can't believe everything you read on the internet. So who knows?
Even if it comes from my own website.
I don't think the CCP has infiltrated your website or anything like that. So let me just give this a read. The key to building lasting habits is focusing on creating a new identity first. That's the sentence I'd love to get your take on. Your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. What you do now is a mirror image of the type of person you believe that you are, either consciously or subconsciously. To change your behavior for good, you need to start believing new things about yourself. You need to build identity-based.
Important larger picture, big picture thing about habits, which is every habit that you have, we build habits to solve the repeated problems that we face in life. And I'm using problems in a very general sense here. You know, like let's say that you come home from work and you feel tired and exhausted from a long day. Well, in a sense, coming home from work at 6 p.m. and feeling tired is a problem. And especially if you experience it repeatedly, you got to come up with some kind of solution for that. And generally speaking, we just kind of like try things out in life. And so you can imagine one person solves the problem of feeling exhausted by scrolling Instagram mindlessly for 30 minutes. And another person solves that problem by playing video games for an hour. And a third person solves it by going for a run for 20 minutes. And those are all solutions to the same kind of underlying problem, but some of them are more healthy or more productive or serve us better than others. And what do you think the odds are that the solutions you've come up with to the repeated problems in your life are the optimal one? Like, it's just so unlikely that whatever you happen to have stumbled into throughout life is the perfect way or the best habit that serves you most. So I think what I'm trying to get at there is maybe take a little bit of the pressure off yourself and don't worry about judging yourself so much. You're just trying to solve the repeated problems that you face. But once you realize that it's unlikely that your current solutions are the optimal solutions, well, now maybe we can step outside and above ourselves and look down and try to come up with a better solution. So rather than drinking a Coke to get the carbonation, we can drink sparkling water. So that's one example for the substance, which is, says if you want word of mouth, you have to create something remarkable. And that means that it's worthy of remark, right? That it's like worthy of talking about. So you have to start with that. So like the three things that I always focus on are, am I writing something that's timeless? So if it's timeless and evergreen, then you have a longer period where it could become a hit. If it's something that's just really relevant to the current moment, 2 years from now, you've kind of passed your window for it taking off.
It's like the blog post you wrote that got to the producers for television.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Similar example.
Right. Am I writing something that's pretty universal? So that's another kind of filter for me. Everybody has habits. Everybody's trying to build good habits or break bad ones, even if they're not thinking about it like carefully. It's just kind of part of life. And so not everybody in the world's going to buy the book, but pretty much anybody can look at the cover and be like, yeah, I get why that would be useful. That's a thing that, you know, most people are going to want. So timeless is universal. And then I feel like you have to pick something that fascinates you, because if you're genuinely interested in it, that comes through in the writing. I think Morgan Housel has some kind of line where it's like, writing for yourself is fun and it shows. Writing for other people is work and it shows. And like it, you know, people have a good BS meter for that. One of the things I recommend in the book is called the 2-minute rule. And it says, just take whatever habit you're trying to build and you scale it down to something that takes 2 minutes or less to do. So read 30 books a year becomes read 1 page, or meditate 5 days a week for 30 minutes becomes meditate for 60 seconds. And you're just trying to master the art of showing up. A habit must be established before it can be improved. It's got to become like the standard before you worry about optimizing it into some perfect thing. So make it easy to do, make it easy to show up. And then the final thing is make it satisfying. Now, if you've done those first 3 steps well, it's obvious, it's an attractive version of it, it's pretty easy to do. you're probably going to feel pretty good about yourself because you're at the end of the meditation session now. So like that'll probably be pretty satisfying. But you can layer on some kind of additional benefit. Maybe you get to have your favorite type of coffee or your favorite drink after that. Or maybe you get to have a bubble bath or a walk in the woods or whatever sounds motivating to you. So find some way to add some additional positive emotions to the experience. Because if you feel good about it, you're going to want to repeat it. And this is something that in Atomic Habits, I call it the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is behaviors that get rewarded get repeated, and behaviors that get punished get avoided. And it's so basic, it's so obvious, but all humans want to feel good. We all want to have positive emotions, to be supported, to be loved, to be rewarded, to have something that feels good. And so how can you get that feeling and associate it with your habits? That's kind of the core idea. And ultimately, this connects back to what we talked about with identity, which is the perfect version is when you perform a habit and you feel good because it's reinforcing your desired identity. I'm the type of person who wants to meditate each day, or I'm the type of person who doesn't miss meditation sessions. And then, even if it's only 60 seconds, you can feel good about doing it because it's reinforcing your desire.
Tactical question. Did you do that through access to Nielsen BookScan?
I didn't have access to BookScan because I was just a poor blogger who was, trying to make a book. So I didn't have access to any of that stuff. But what I did was I just did tons of Google searches. And usually what happens is that when an author hits 1 million copies or 4 million or whatever,
they'll let you know.
Yeah, they let you know. And so there's all kinds of stuff. Or you'll find like, if you just search a title and then copies sold, there's New York Times articles that profile an author and they say, their book sold 6 million copies or whatever. So it was just a bunch of legwork like that. Anyway, I put together that spreadsheet. Let's say I got like 150 titles or something. And then I started to look for patterns. So what format do all these titles follow? And I think I ended up coming up with, there are about 6. I won't be able to remember them all off the top of my head, but the most common format is the blank of blank. So the power of habit, the life-changing magic of tidying up, the power of now, the power of positive thinking, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, the blah, blah, blah. So it's always the blank of blank. And that's a very proven, the war of art. It's a very proven format. The psychology of money, like we can just keep going on and on and on. There's so many examples like that. And usually what people do is they take their topic, and that's the second piece, and then they take some type of descriptor, and that's the first one. And ideally, you're combining things that are not usually combined. So the life-changing magic of tidying up. So tidying up is the topic of the book, but now you're telling me that it's life-changing. And what you find is a lot of these best-selling books, they have some element of contrast in the title. There's something that's unexpected about it. We are all part of multiple tribes. Sometimes those tribes are like large, like what it means to be American. And sometimes they're small, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street or a member of the local gym. But all of those tribes that you belong to, the large groups and the small groups, they all have this set of expectations. They've got a set of social norms for what you do when you're in that group and what the typical way is to act and behave and what kind of habits they follow. And the more that your habits go with the grain of the expectations of the group, the more attractive they feel like to you, because it's like, hey, I fit in, I belong, I'm part of something. And the more that they go against the grain of the expectations of the group, the harder they are to stick to, especially in the long run. Maybe you can do it for a day or a week or, I don't know, a month or two, but like at some point you kind of keep rubbing against, you have this like friction where you're conflicting with the group, and it becomes hard to stick to that for the long run. And so the little takeaway that I kind of think of now is you want to join groups, to join tribes where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. Because if it's normal in that group, then it becomes really motivating to stick to it. And furthermore, the kind of like ancillary habits that are part of that group, the other expectations, are things that you're probably going to soak up. The trajectory of your life bends in the direction of your habits. And a lot of what we've talked about today, whether it's launching a book or writing a book, whether it's, building an exercise habit or a meditation habit, growing an email list or developing a creative habit, it comes back to consistency. It comes back to doing small things well each day, trying to live one good day, and then waking up again tomorrow and doing the same thing. And the world is very results oriented, and that's fine. Like that, we all want to get better results, but almost all the results that you want are a lagging measure of your habits. So your bank account is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your physical fitness is a lagging measure of your training habits. Your even like silly stuff like the amount of clutter in your living room is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits, you know? So if you want your results to change, the habits that precede them are the things that actually need to change. It's like fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. And I don't think that means you have to be radical about it. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to upend your entire life. Really, all you need to do is focus on having like 5 good minutes. You know, like you can do a lot with 5 good minutes. 5 good minutes of exercise can reset your mood. 5 good minutes of conversation can restore a relationship. 5 good minutes of writing can make you feel great about the manuscript again. And so it doesn't take much to feel good, to get back on the path, to continue to make progress. And small habits, showing up in little ways, mastering the art of showing up, trying to get a little bit better each day. Those are all things that you can keep in mind as you try to just live one good day today and be on a good trajectory. And that really, one of the core ideas of Atomic Habits is getting 1% better today. And it's really about that. It's not about measuring it and like, those are 1% improvement or 1.6% or whatever. It's not about the numbers. It's like a mindset. It's a philosophy.
That's really good. I'm gonna give this 4 big booms on the boom meter. Boom!